Before today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. If you want to see a case or topic covered by Paranormally Listed, then go to criminallylisted.com and fill out the questionnaire under the Suggest a Case tab. Number 3. Track 61. If you're ever in Manhattan and find yourself strolling by the Waldorf Astoria Hotel on East 49th Street, look down when you walk over the sidewalk grating, because you might just catch a glimpse of one of the government's biggest secrets during the 1940s. But before we get to that, a little about the Waldorf Astoria itself. Built between 1929 and 1931, the hotel was a bastion to Gilded Age refugees during the city's dirty 30s. It was one of half a dozen opulent hotels constructed during this time and catered to the well-to-do not only from New York City, but from around the world. U.S. President Herbert Hoover was an early guest, and the hotel's presidential suite has played home away from home to every sitting president since then. In fact, the Waldorf is the preferred presidential stopover by the U.S. Secret Service, not only for its blocked-off seclusion within Manhattan's grid-like street plan and specifically designed three-tiered grand ballroom which offers multiple secret observation areas for security forces, but also for what hotel guests don't see, the basement. Actually, calling the underground complex beneath the Waldorf a basement is like calling Area 51 an airport. It doesn't quite do it justice. And that's because, with the right permissions, a person stepping off the secret elevator taken far below 49th Street would encounter a massive, bunker-like facility. The area not only houses the hotel's massive vaults to protect its stockpiles of gold, cutlery, and tableware, but also connects to the rest of the city with its own clandestine rail network. The destination for this area is Track 61, a siding that branches off from the New York Metro Rail service. It is said to be connected to not only Grand Central Station, but to JFK Airport as well. It is also thought to be emergency ready with fueled-up light rail cars to be used by fleeing VIPs in the event of a power failure. As the story goes, President Franklin Roosevelt was fond of using the underground train station in order to enter and leave the hotel without having to be seen in his wheelchair. Stricken by polio as a young man, FDR was cautious about hiding his condition from the public. It seemed to work, because that public elected Roosevelt to 4 terms as president. Up until recently, sitting dormant on Track 61 beneath the hotel was said to be FDR's private armored rail car, capable of being loaded with his own limousine to use while in Manhattan. Secrecy still abounds regarding the Waldorf's secret rail and its exclusive red-carpeted elevator from penthouse to track. There was a time when a particular NY Metro employee would offer tours of the area to select members of the media, but his sudden firing in 2017 for conducting such tours put a stop to this access. FDR's railcar, which sat unused and collecting dust for 60-plus years, was eventually transported to a Connecticut rail museum in 2019. And today it's unknown whether the underground track facility is still used by sitting presidents to secret about New York City. But given that current President Biden famously often told of his fondness for rail travel, perhaps a glance through the 49th Street gates might offer a glimpse of the Commander-in-Chief as well. Number 2. Mount Weather. It's a plot point fans of disaster movies know well. It's Armageddon. It's a rogue meteor, nuclear strike, or alien invasion. Take your pick. The American president is whisked away to a secure location to keep the country's government alive. But there are a number of places where he or she can be taken. There's Raven Rock Mountain Facility near Camp David in Lillington, North Carolina. There's Cheney Mountain Complex in Colorado. There's even the PEOC, the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, deep under the front lawn of the White House. But while the country's leader has half a dozen locations in which they can hunker down, what are the hundreds of other heads and subheads of state? For those leaders, there's the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center in the Shenandoah Valley near Bluemont, Virginia. But the thing about Mount Weather is, in case of emergency, those leaders wouldn't necessarily have to reach the base for their jobs to be carried on, because the underground facility already houses dozens of civilians who are qualified and trained to take over those jobs should the need arise. These hundreds of potential secretaries of labor, state, transportation, treasury, and etc. are not, however, holed up in a dark mineshaft, waiting for the end of the world. But rather, they are housed in a vast city-like venue complete with a hospital, cafeteria, and a television station, with streets and sidewalks, a working subway, cabin-like dormitories, office buildings, police and fire stations, and an electrical generation plant. There's even a massive subterranean lake blasted out of the solid rock that is capable of providing fresh water to 2 250,000-gallon tanks. Given its scope, it's not hard to understand that Mount Weather has been around for a long, long time. About an hour's drive from DC, the place was initially designed and built in the early 1950s at the start of the Cold War. President Eisenhower and his cabinet were said to be frequent visitors back then during nuclear shelter drills. While never official back then, there were rumors of its existence. The 1957 novel 7 Days in May raised the eyebrows of some officials with its veiled reference to a secret government base called Mount Thunder, but nothing was ever confirmed. Later, under Kennedy, after the events of the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1961, it was thought to have been expanded and updated. Always in secret, with a $1 billion black budget always off the government's official books. The only hints to its existence were the whispers of Washington insiders. That was until December 1st, 1974. On that day, TWA Flight 514 crashed in the Appalachians, and the existence of the scope of Mount Weather's facility was exposed to the public. Later, Vice President Dick Cheney is thought to have taken shelter there in the days after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. And today, with its clandestine cover blown, the above-ground 561-acre area openly houses the Operations Center for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA. Still, it's not like you can just wander up and take a look-see next time you're driving through Fauquier County, Virginia. Mount Weather remains today one of the most secure locations in the United States. In 2006, when Tom Vanderbilt of the Guardian newspaper called FEMA to inquire about Mount Weather, he got nowhere. "We're not going to talk about Mount Weather," FEMA spokesperson Don Jacks told him. "It's not that I can't, we just don't." Perhaps the secrecy is warranted, because aside from the extensive living facilities underground, there is also said to be an extensive computer network, holding backups of the government's secret files on millions of Americans. Today, the caverns deep underground in Virginia still house the U.S. government's ability to keep the lights on, as it were, in case of a disaster. And right now, there are about 6,500 U.S. citizens walking around with a special card that entitles them with access to Mount Weather if there's an emergency. So in essence, the facility is designed to be a backup for the U.S. Capitol, except in this case, the corridors of power are carved out of solid stone. Number 1. Hangar 18. Folks familiar with the content of this channel have no doubt heard of the Roswell incident. In July of 1947, a UFO is thought to have crash-landed in the New Mexico desert. The U.S. government is further thought to have collected the downed spaceship and its alien occupants and whisked them away to a secret location for further study. But contrary to popular belief, the flying saucer and its ETs were not taken to Nevada's famed Area 51. They were instead transported to Hangar 18. Not in the desert, but to a special, secure, secret warehouse on the grounds of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Wright Field, as it was called at the time of the crash, was a hub of post-war military activity. But most importantly, the base housed the offices of the Forward Technology Division. One of its main clandestine goals was to reverse engineer the wreckage of enemy airplanes and weapons. In 1951, the division was making great strides in dissecting Soviet aircraft debris from crashes that occurred during the Korean War. So it's thought to be the perfect place to perhaps reverse engineer alien technology as well. After all, what could be more foreign than crashed debris of a spaceship from another world? It's curious to point out that just 12 years after the Roswell crash, the U.S. Air Force and Army revealed that they had been working with the Canadians on the Avro car. A flying saucer-like vehicle they hoped would give them the edge in the Cold War. Alas, the Silver Bug, as it was dubbed, never flew the way the generals hoped it would, and it was junked in 1962. But some researchers believe that this Avro car was a direct result of technology gleaned by Wright-Patterson scientists from UFO crash sites like Roswell, Aztec, and Kecksburg. But what about those occupants of the interplanetary craft? Given that Wright-Patterson is in the business of scientific study, it's thought that their cryogenic facilities would be the perfect place to keep any fallen ETs on ice. After all, the base's labs house mitered terrestrial animals used for testing purposes, so an industrial biofreezer would have likely been among the facilities on the base. In the ensuing years, Hangar 18 is said to have morphed into less of an airplane garage and more into an underground terminal connected by elaborate maze of tunnels. Researchers point to the base's Building 23 as a possible location of the government's secret alien study annex. Though the building itself is relatively small, it is thought that beneath it sprawls workshops, laboratories, and vaults where even today the government is concealing the existence of UFOs. Retired Air Force Captain Robert Collins, who has studied the schematics of the base, believes that sometime in the early 1950s, the base received a full-size alien spacecraft recovered from a crash site. Engineers dug down and dropped the craft below the ground and then constructed Building 23 atop the subterranean warehouse. Of course, such talk is purely conjecture because no official word has been forthcoming about the base's unofficial duties. Still, over the past 75 years, a few of the tens of thousands of base workers have come forward about strange going-ons they've witnessed at Wright-Patterson, especially after purported UFO crashes in 1947, 1953, and 1957. According to ufologist Len Stringfield, one such witness was a former naval intelligence officer who told him he actually saw dead aliens arrive at the base. "I saw the alien bodies at Wright-Patterson," the man said. "I was in the right place at the right time when the crates arrived at night by DC-7. For many years, the researchers were stymied by the lack of willingness of witnesses to go on the record with their testimony. That is, until 1997, when June Crane came forward. Crane was a base secretary who had top-level security clearance due to the nature of her job typing classified documents. She said that the Air Force knew of at least 3 UFO crashes before 1952, and that she was present when the bodies of the crash victims were brought to Wright-Patterson. She then described the bodies as greenish-blue in color and about 4 feet tall. They were non-human, and they were dead, and they brought them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and put them in the icebox, Crane said. Still, there is also testimony from reputable witnesses of what they didn't see that also adds to the intrigue. In 1975, former Air Force General, Republican leader, and Senator Barry Goldwater went on the record stating that during his run for president in 1964, he contacted the Air Force about gaining access to the secret catacombs under Wright-Patterson. Goldwater approached his friend, General Curtis LeMay, with the unofficial request. But according to Goldwater, LeMay shot back, "Not only can't you get into it, but don't ever mention it to me again." Even legendary FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was turned away after requesting a visit to the base during the late 1940s. Today, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base employs upwards of 20,000 people and is one of the largest military bases in the United States. And the brass in charge of the facility are well aware of its reputation in UFO lore. In late 2021, the Air Force announced that Wright-Patterson would soon house a special software factory designed to supply computer programs and networks for the military. Its name, of course, is Hangar 18. And credentialed visitors are welcome to check out the offices, perhaps as long as they don't ask to see the basement. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. We also have a podcast about cold cases that were eventually solved called Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.